uses this name collectively, but confines it to the followers of Achilles from Theotis, who were the original Hellenes. When speaking of the entire host, he calls them Darnaeans, or Argives, or Achaeans. Neither is there any mention of barbarians in his poems, clearly because there were as yet no Hellenes opposed to them by a common, distinctive name. Thus, the several Hellenic tribes, and I mean by the term Hellenes those who, while forming separate communities, had a common language, and were afterwards called by a common name, owing to their weakness and isolation, were never united in any great enterprise before the Trojan War. And they only made the expedition against Troy after they had gained considerable experience of the sea. Minos is the first to whom tradition ascribes the possession of a navy. He made himself master of a great part of what is now termed the Hellenic Sea. He conquered the Cyclades, and was the first colonizer of most of them, expelling the Carians, and appointing his own sons to govern in them. Lastly, it was he who, from a natural desire to protect his growing revenues, sought, as far as he was able, to clear the sea of pirates. For in ancient times, both the Hellenes and those barbarians whose homes were on the coast of the mainland, or in islands, when they began to find their way to one another by sea, had recourse to piracy. They were commanded by powerful chiefs, who took this means of increasing their wealth and providing for their poorer followers. They would fall upon the unwalled and straggling towns, or rather villages, which they plundered, and maintained themselves chiefly by the plunder of them. For as yet, such an occupation was held to be honourable, and not disgraceful. This is proved by the practice of certain tribes on the mainland, who to the present day glory in piratical exploits, and by the witness of the ancient poets, in whose verses the question is invariably asked of newly arrived voyagers whether they are pirates, which implies that neither those who are questioned disclaim, nor those who are interested in knowing censure the occupation. On land also neighbouring communities plundered each other, and there are many parts of Hellas in which the old practices still continue, as, for example, among the Ozolian Locrians, Aetolians, Acarnanians, and the adjacent regions of the continent. The fashion of wearing arms among these continental tribes is a relic of their old predatory habits. For in ancient times all Hellenes carried weapons because their homes were undefended and intercourse was unsafe. Like the barbarians, they went armed in their everyday life, and the continuance of the custom in certain parts of the country indicates that it once prevailed everywhere. The Athenians were the first who laid aside arms and adopted an easier and more luxurious way of life. Quite recently, the old-fashioned refinement of dress still lingered among the elder men of their richer class, who wore undergarments of linen, and bound back their hair in a knot with golden clasps in the form of grasshoppers. And the same customs long survived among the elders of Ionia, having been derived from their Athenian ancestors. On the other hand, the simple dress which is now common was first worn at Sparta, and there, more than anywhere else, the life of the rich was assimilated to that of the people. The Lacedaemonians, too, were the first who, in their athletic exercises, stripped naked and rubbed themselves over with oil. But this was not the ancient custom. Athletes, formerly, even when they were contending at Olympia, wore girdles about their loins, a practice which lasted until quite lately, and still prevails among barbarians, especially those of Asia, where the combatants in boxing and wrestling matches wear girdles, and many other customs which are now confined to the barbarians might be shown to have existed formerly in Hellas. In later times, when navigation had become general and wealth was beginning to accumulate, cities were built upon the seashore and fortified. Peninsulas too were occupied and walled off with a view to commerce and defence against the neighbouring tribes. But the older towns, both in the islands and on the continent, in order to protect themselves against the piracy which so long prevailed, were built inland, and there they remain to this day. For the piratical tribes plundered not only one another, but all those who, without being seamen, lived on the sea-coast. The islanders were even more addicted to piracy than the inhabitants of the